Well, hi everybody, and thanks for your patience today. It's been kind of a miserable one for all of those who have a flu or something. So hopefully I'll be back on Wednesday. And in the meantime, what I'd like you to focus on is the stuff in the module. I'm going to go through that very quickly with you, but the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a bunch of prerequisites to Module 4, and you need to have done those before you can dive into the last bits of the interview assignments. So, all the stuff that's in the assignments up until now have been designed to help you with your informational interview, which is due on the 28th of September. So, let's quickly look at what I put together for you. You have chapter 5, the informational interview, which contains a bunch of different contexts of interviews that you're not going to be using in this class, but you may use later. So those would be press conference interviews, broadcast interviews, and other kinds of interviews that would be specific to a kind of career or situation. You are focused on informational interviews, and these chapter will tell you most of the stuff you need to know about informational interviews. And next thing I want to talk to you about is the field interview check-in. Now, the field interview is your next assignment after you've turned in the informational interview. The field interview check-in is very simple. It's pass-fail, and I would like you to it today, but essentially what you're doing is telling me the name of the person you're interviewing, description of their work and their title, etc., and confirm that they're not a close family relative. And in 50 to 75, please explain why it is that you chose this person. So there's the due date of this assignment is, oh, I'm sorry, you do get 5 points, but it's still fail. And it is due on October 1st. So you can, if you already know who you're interviewing, you can fill that out now and put into the submission. After, what do I want to tell you about? Well, the study is still open, and so is the description of the informational interview. Make sure you read all through those things so that you understand that. The interview is in here as well. It will help you understand all the different pieces of that. And then I have the workshop that I gave you last week on how to write up your analysis. And today we're going to go over the opening and closing of the interview. And I think I've already talked to you about the structure of the interview. So we'll go over that as well. So just stand by for a second. So let's start then with the information that is contained in structuring the interview. Is built on the chapter 4 information. And I know you've all read chapter 4, right? So I'm going to go through this. Now, I'm just reminding you that in interviews have a different structure than our personal conversations, and you've been discussing that already. And this is the structure and the planning that is required in an informational interview. And so we'll be talking mostly about an interview guide, and that is the outline for all your questions and the answers that you receive and the impressions that you're able to glean from those answers. So this is your document you bring to your interview. It's fine if you look at it and make sure that you're on track. There's a bunch of different ways you can write this out, whatever's most comfortable for you. But I'm going to talk about transitions today also. So when you're putting together your question sequence, then you're going to want to be having smooth transitions from one thing to the next. And along with your questions, your transitions can go into this document as well. That will help your interview flow much more naturally. Write your document in conversational tone because that will make it for and you don't have to, in fact, I don't want you to read off your questions. Just know what you're going to ask, jot them down in a way that you can remember them and move from one to the next smoothly. A bunch of different sequences that Stuart goes through, and the one that you're going to probably use is the topical sequence. So this is where you ask people to give information about different topics. Now, you might be able to use a chronological order type sequence. And did you do this? What happened next? What time was this? So these are things you might be asking in this interview, but probably not. You'll probably be sticking to the topical interview. And the space, the cause to effect, and the problem solution are also interview sequences that you're likely not to use in this particular interview. However, it's for you to know them so that you can be familiar with them and be able to respond to quiz questions that ask you to determine what kind of sequence the question is asking about. Once you have decided what sequence you want, then you're going to develop your guide, your outline, by identifying the major areas you're going to talk about and then diving into those subtopics. And those can also be called probes, right? And consider using subtopics of subtopics or probes of probes. These probes can be those surprise probes, those surprise questions that you ask of your interviewee as you go through it. This makes it much more genuine. We're not going to use any non-scheduled interview guides, but they are just a guide and there's no pre-preparation but we're going to be using the moderately scheduled interview guide, which contains all the information in this PowerPoint. So all your major questions are going to be in the guide. Your follow-ups will be in the guide. There's a lot of flexibility and freedom to add probes and notes to yourself, like say X, then I can ask Y. So this is a lot of different flexibility and it's useful for different situations and different interviewees. The one thing about the moderately scheduled interview guide is that it does help impose some structure to you and it aids in your recording of answers. If you write it carefully, you give yourself enough space, you can write down some of those answers and figure out what you want to remember as you hear it. And the thing about the guide is that it's easy to conduct, and you can replicate this kind of interview with many different people over many different contexts throughout your life. So when you read up on this to make sure that you're getting all the information correct, make sure that you understand guide, that you know what the benefits are. When you write the guide out, make sure to probe and make sure to include of probes. That's a little typo there, sorry. As you practice, use those transitions to create a really smooth flow and write those transitions down because that will be something that I'll be looking for in your final submission. You don't really know what kinds of phrases you can use sorry, if you don't know what kinds of phrases that are phrases that you can use, I think USF Writes has a big bunch of uh, downloadable on all different kinds of um, writing transitions is a skill. And so it'll give you a whole list of different transitions you can use, the kinds of phrases that show that you're moving from one thing to the next. So, we're not going to be in class to do these exercises, but if you are meeting with your partner before Wednesday, think of doing these exercises and about what kinds of organizational keys do you use as you went through the practice. All right, so I'm going to move from this chapter 4 lecture to the lecture on opening and closing the interview. And we've mentioned that a lot throughout the course so far. You've already read up on it, but I'm going to give you a short PowerPoint on the benefits of opening and closing and how to have great ones. So stand by. Well, all right, that was a little challenging. So, opening and closing the interviews. Let's move forward. So, strong openings build rapport and they help to orient the interviewee. So, why is this important? Well, first of all, you want to have good rapport with whoever it is that you're just talking with in the context of an interview. So it's really important to establish that rapport right away. And orientation helps the interviewee understand what's happening in the course of the interview and sometimes, course of a day if it's a long interview. So successful rapport and orientation are key to having a great collaborative interview. So, what happens when you have a poor opening? Well, you can have some expectations, both parties in the interview, or you could have mistrust between parties. Like, it's like, I don't know what's happening. Is a long interview all day long, or am I going to just be here for half an hour? And kinds of mistrust can then lead to some defensiveness between the parties or the individuals. So it's really important to have a great opening. So, how do you do that? Well, it's all about what you say and what you do, or what you don't say, or what you fail to do. So, developing rapport. Now, what is rapport? Rapport is a genuine relationship between parties. This doesn't have to mean that you're going to have a relationship with them forever, but when you come into a situation where you don't know another person, there are ways to still develop that rapport that moves you forward in a positive way. Developing rapport also enhances trust of the person who's the interviewee and the other party that who the interviewer. So orienting parties, this is how you do it. You describe the purpose or the length or both. You can describe the goals and expected outcomes of the interview, but it's just about positioning the person and understanding what comes next, why we're here, and what the interviewer's purpose is. It gets everybody on the same page. So you have to think then about how you're properly going to build rapport with your own interview partner. Your classmates, you've practiced stuff together already. You probably think, oh, I don't have to do that. But you need to do it to show me that you are a competent interview. So these are the things you should look at when it comes to building rapport. I want you to take a couple minutes, write down your thoughts on these questions, and we'll get back to that in a moment. As want you to think about orientation in the same way, because again, the purpose of orientation in your mock interview is to show me that you are a competent orienting in that you know how to orient the other party to the interview at hand. So when we get back together, I'm hoping we can discuss everybody's responses to the questions, and we'll keep track of some of those ideas and thoughts. So these are some ideas to take forward with you for the next day or two. Reflect on your own ideas. If you are meeting up with your partner for some reason, maybe practice, which is a great idea, reflect on the things you both came up with and summarize those main points because the new insights you gain from this exercise will help you to do a better job on your informational interview. So, closing the interview. This also requires planning. And again, it is not a quick sentence saying, thanks for coming. It's been nice to meet you. That's all I have for you today. That's what is an abrupt or ill-planned closing. So you don't want to have one of those. It's bad interview practice. And also, it may reduce your own credibility with the person who's interviewing you or parties, right? In closing, you need to take your time and be tactful. You need to gently ease people out of the interview proper and into the idea that we are wrapping up now. So here's some guidelines to think about as you close your interview. You want to do some of these, don't have to do all of them. For example, be sincere and honest throughout and thank them for their time at the top of the interview or the closing. Create a dialogue, not a monologue. Don't just talk at the person. Ask them a few questions. And a great question might be, well, I'll tell you about that in a second, but asking a couple of questions as the person's sort of getting the idea that it's time, we're wrapping up now. That is a great idea too. And it's important not to introduce new topics or anything like that. This just confuses the interviewee and they're not sure whether the interview is going on or what's happening. You don't want to have your interviewee confused. Avoid failed departures. Now, what is a failed departure? Well, since you've read the chapter already, you already know what that is. But just to remind you, an example of a failed departure is when you say goodbye to somebody, they walk out the door, and then you immediately walk into the parking lot and run them again. So you're going to want to make sure that you avoid those awkward situations because once you say goodbye, it should be goodbye and no second each other a second time. Now, here are some techniques. As you're doing your uh, closing, you can create a clearinghouse question. What's a clearinghouse question? I bet you guys know what that is. Basically, it's asking if there's anything that the interviewer has not asked that the interviewee would like to share with them. You can say, okay, we're to the end of our time together. So that's declaring the completion of the purpose without saying we're done now. And you always want to thank the person who comes, even if you've known them forever. You want to thank them for spending time with you. And in some cases, it may be appropriate to say, okay, we want to have another interview with you. So that time now. So there's many different things that you can do in your closing. Make sure that you spend about 90 seconds to 2 minutes on that. So that's all I have for you today. Again, thank you very much for your patience, and I hope that I'll be back on Wednesday and we can work together on your final informational interview. Take care.